He offered his jacket to a shivering woman at the bus stop, not knowing she was a CEO who would change his life forever. The rain wasn't just falling, it was a physical assault. A cold, determined torrent that found its way through every seam and past every collar, carrying the city's grime with it. For Daniel Carter, this Tuesday evening in November was a grim punctuation mark on another day of quiet desperation. He stood hunched under the flimsy shelter of a bus stop, the plastic rattling against the metal frame like chattering teeth. At 28, Daniel's life was a collection of deferred dreams. His mind was a cathedral of soaring atriums, sustainable community spaces, and elegant, light-filled libraries. His reality was a cramped cubicle at a third-rate architectural firm, where his days were spent performing digital drudgery, adjusting plumbing schematics for soulless strip malls, and ensuring the ventilation systems in concrete parking garages were up to code. He was an architect in name, but a draftsman in practice, his creativity slowly suffocating under the weight of mediocrity. His master's degree, once a shining beacon, was now a half-finished relic, abandoned when his mother's medical bills had become a tidal wave. Now, his salary evaporated into her care, his rent for a dingy one-bedroom apartment, and the ever-present student loans for a degree he couldn't even complete. He pulled his jacket tighter. It was a good jacket, a charcoal gray wool coat he'd saved for months to buy 2 years ago. It was his one piece of armor against the world, his sole claim to looking like the professional he desperately wanted to be. The bus was late, as usual. The digital sign flickered erratically, showing a jumble of nonsensical characters before going dark. A collective sigh went through the small huddle of commuters. That's when he noticed her. She stood slightly apart from the group, just beyond the meager protection of the shelter's roof. She was older, perhaps in her late 50s, with a sharp, intelligent face that seemed at odds with her vulnerability. Her hair, a sophisticated salt and pepper cut, was plastered to her forehead. She wore a tailored business suit of expensive-looking fabric, now soaked and clinging to her frame. But it was the way she was shivering that caught Daniel's attention. It wasn't a slight tremble, it was a deep, bone-rattling shudder that shook her entire body. She had her arms wrapped around herself, her knuckles white. She looked lost, exposed, and utterly miserable. He watched her for a full minute, a silent debate raging within him. If he gave her his jacket, he'd be soaked and frozen by the time he got home. He already felt a cold coming on. It was a stupid, impractical idea. He should just mind his own business. But then he thought of his mother, how she hated feeling cold, how a simple warm blanket could change her entire disposition. He saw the woman's face again, a flicker of something that looked like despair in her eyes as another gust of wind and rain hit her. He couldn't not do it. His compassion, a muscle well exercised by years of caregiving, simply took over. He stepped out from under the shelter. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice quiet. She turned, her eyes, a surprisingly fierce, intelligent gray widening in surprise. She seemed so unused to being addressed by strangers that she almost took a step back. "You look frozen," he said, already shrugging off his coat. "Please, take this. You need it more than I do." She stared at him, then at the jacket he was holding out. "Oh, no, I couldn't. You'll be cold." Her voice was raspy, but carried an undeniable authority. "I'll be fine. My apartment is only a few stops away. It's no trouble, really." He didn't wait for her to argue further. He gently draped the heavy wool coat over her shoulders. The warmth still clinging to the lining seemed to instantly calm her shivers. He then opened his battered, slightly bent umbrella and held it over her head. "Here." For a moment, she was speechless. She looked at him, really looked at him, with an intensity that was almost unnerving. It felt as if she were seeing past his worn jeans and tired expression, right into the core of him. "Thank you," she finally whispered, the two words imbued with a profound sincerity. My car broke down. My phone is dead. It's been a rather trying evening." "We all have them," Daniel said with a small, weary smile. Just then the bus groaned around the corner, its headlights cutting through the deluge. He handed her the umbrella. That's my bus. You keep the jacket and the umbrella. Stay warm. Wait, she called out as he turned. Your name. How can I return this? Don't worry about it, he said, already jogging towards the bus. Just pass it on someday. He climbed the steps, paid his fare with a damp bill, and found the seat by a fogged-up window. He watched as she stood there, holding his umbrella, wrapped in his coat, a solitary, dignified figure on a dark, rainy street. He felt a chill seep into his bones through his damp shirt, but a strange warmth bloomed in his chest. For the first time all day, he felt like he'd done something that mattered. Isabelle Sterling was not a woman who was easily rattled. As the CEO of Sterling & Vance, she navigated billion-dollar contracts and hostile takeovers with a placid, unshakable calm. But standing at that bus stop, soaked and shivering, she had felt a terrifying wave of helplessness. Her driver had a family emergency. Her own car was in the shop. In a fit of stubborn pride, she had decided to take the bus. The universe, it seemed, had decided to teach her a lesson in humility. Now, sitting in the back of a taxi she had finally managed to hail, she clutched the heavy wool coat around her. It smelled faintly of rain, laundry detergent, and something else, a clean, papery scent. She reached into an inner pocket and her fingers brushed against something solid, a small, well-worn paperback. She pulled it out. The Eyes of the Skin, Architecture and the Senses by Juhani Pallasmaa. Tucked inside the front cover was a folded piece of paper, a sketch. She unfolded it under the taxi's dome light. It was a stunningly detailed pencil drawing of a derelict waterfront warehouse, but where others saw decay, the artist had seen potential. With a few deft lines, he had transformed it into a vibrant community library, Takas, with large, arching windows, a rooftop garden where children were drawn playing, and a small cafe spilling onto a newly built pier. It was a design filled with life, with empathy, with vision. It was the kind of architecture her father, the founder of Sterling & Vance, had believed in. A name was written in small, neat letters in the corner, D. Carter. When Isabelle walked into her sprawling office on the 50th floor the next morning, she was a woman on a mission. Her assistant, Marcus, a man who could procure rare orchids or untangle international zoning laws with equal efficiency, stood ready with her morning coffee. Marcus, she said, placing the book and the sketch on her vast glass desk, cancel my 9 o'clock. I have a new priority. I need you to find a man named D. Carter. He is likely an architect or a student. Last night, he gave me his coat at a bus stop on the corner of Elm and 6th. This was in the pocket. Marcus looked from the sketch to his boss, a flicker of surprise crossing his usually unflappable face. Of course, Miss Sterling. I'll get right on it. 2 days later, Daniel was hunched over his monitor, trying to find a way to make a proposed big-box store look less like a soul-crushing beige monolith when his phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Is this Daniel Carter? A crisp, professional voice asked. Yes. My name is Marcus Thorne. I'm calling from the office of Isabelle Sterling, CEO of Sterling & Vance. Ms. Sterling would like to meet with you. Daniel's blood ran cold. Sterling & Vance, the giants, the firm he and his classmates had revered and despaired of ever being good enough for. Is everything all right? He stammered. Ms. Sterling will explain everything tomorrow, Marcus said smoothly. A car will be waiting for you. The next morning, Daniel stood before the soaring glass and steel headquarters of Sterling & Vance, feeling like an imposter. He wore his only suit, slightly too tight in the shoulders, and clutched his worn portfolio. The lobby was a cathedral of minimalist design, all white marble and hushed efficiency. He was escorted to the top floor. The CEO's office was larger than his entire apartment, with a panoramic view of the city that made his stomach swoop. And sitting behind a massive desk, looking impossibly elegant and powerful, was the woman from the bus stop. She stood as he entered, a small, knowing smile on her lips. She was wearing a chic navy blue dress, the picture of control and authority. It was hard to reconcile this woman with the shivering figure he had helped. Mr. Carter, she said, thank you for coming. Please, sit. She held up the book and the sketch. I believe these are yours. Daniel felt a blush creep up his neck. I hope you don't mind. I draw sometimes. Mind? She said, her gray eyes sparkling. Mr. Carter, this sketch has more heart and vision than a dozen of the multi-million-dollar proposals that cross my desk each week. This is what architecture should be. She leaned forward. I did some research on you. You were top of your class at Northgate before you had to withdraw. Your professors spoke very highly of you. Daniel swallowed hard, unsure where this was going. The act of kindness at the bus stop was one thing, Isabelle continued. Anyone can be kind. But what you did was selfless. You didn't ask for a name, you didn't expect a reward. You simply saw someone in need and you acted. Then, I find this, she tapped the sketch, and I see that the man who acted with such empathy also possesses a rare talent. In my world, that is a combination I haven't seen in a very long time. She paused, her gaze steady. I'm not going to offer you a senior position, but I am going to offer you a chance, a paid position on our new prestige project, the Oak Haven Tower. It's an opportunity to finish your master's degree. The firm will cover the tuition and to work on a landmark building. It's a chance to show us what you can do. Daniel was stunned into silence. It was more than he had dared to dream of, a steady paycheck, his tuition covered, a foot in the door of the best firm in the country. I don't know what to say, he stammered. Say you'll accept, Isabelle said simply. The first few months at Sterling and Vance were a trial by fire. The Oak Haven Tower was a sleek, soulless skyscraper, exactly the kind of corporate project Daniel found uninspiring. He was placed on a team led by a slick, ambitious architect named Caleb, who saw Daniel as nothing more than the CEO's pet project. Caleb and his cronies gave him the most tedious tasks, excluded him from important meetings, and made it clear he was an outsider. But Daniel put his head down and worked. He did the grunt work with meticulous care. He learned the complex software, he studied the senior architect's methods, and in his spare time, he sketched. He filled notebooks with his own ideas, not just for grand buildings, but for small, human-scale interventions, pocket parks, better public seating, more natural light in common areas. Isabelle kept her distance, but she was watching. Once a week, she'd ask him to her office for coffee. They wouldn't talk about the Oak Haven Tower. Instead, she'd ask him about his ideas, about the book he'd been reading. They talked about her father, how he'd started the company with a vision of building communities, not just monuments to wealth. A mentorship began to form, a deep and unexpected friendship built on shared ideals. He, in turn, began to see the lonely, principled woman beneath the powerful CEO. One afternoon, she called him into a conference room. Spread across the table were maps and blueprints of a rundown industrial neighborhood, the very same one that housed the warehouse from his sketch. The city has asked for redevelopment proposals for this district, Isabelle said. The board sees it as a low-profit, high-headache charity case. They want to pass on it. She looked him in the eye. I want you to draft a proposal. Show me what you would do with it. Not a corporate tower, Daniel. Show me your vision, the one from your sketchbook. The day of the board meeting arrived. Caleb presented first, a sleek, data-driven proposal for a cluster of luxury condos and high-end retail that promised staggering returns. The board members nodded. Then it was Daniel's turn. He was nervous, his hands trembling as he laid out his designs. He didn't talk about ROI or square footage. He talked about people. He spoke from the heart. Before he could finish, Isabelle stood up. Thank you, Mr. Carter, she said, her voice ringing with a conviction that silenced the room. Gentlemen, she said, turning to the board, for the last 10 years, this firm has been building monuments to ourselves. We have become incredibly profitable, and we have become spiritually bankrupt. This is about returning to the soul of this company. This vision is the future of Sterling and Vance. Her gamble paid off. The board, cowed by her conviction, approved the project. Daniel was named the project lead. A year later, Daniel stood on a windy patch of land overlooking the river. The skeleton of the new community library, the warehouse from his sketch, was rising behind him. His mother, her health much improved, stood beside him.